A roller coaster disaster in China. Angry young men flood the streets of China, and floods flood the streets of China. And more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, and this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Now, you probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. Incogni helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. Now, probably like many of you, I've got a bucket list of things I'd like to do in my life, and one of the things that's not on my bucket list is riding a roller coaster in China. 2 people were left dangling from their ride after one of the bungee straps on their ride broke mid-flight. The safety mechanism stopped the ride after the bungee snapped, which is why they had to be manually lifted to the ground. Fortunately, the people inside were okay, but I'm sure not. I'm already having nightmares where both straps break. This isn't even a one-off thing. Even Chinese state-run media admits that Chinese roller coasters are shady, and their job is to cover that stuff up, so that's saying something. Now, I don't think that dangerous amusement park rides are the reason, but China's latest problem is people don't want to go there. Tourism to China is way down this year. According to the Wall Street Journal, in the first quarter of 2023, just 52,000 people visited the mainland, compared to 3.7 million in 2019. And most of the tourists who are coming are from Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Macau. So what's the reason? Well, some experts say it's because of deteriorating relations between China and the West, which has made them more wary of visiting. Can't imagine why anyone wouldn't want to be trapped in China for the start of World War III. And speaking of World War III, China may be signaling it's about ready to fire the first shot. CCTV released a multi-part documentary called Chasing Dreams, which shows the armies preparing for an attack on Taiwan. It features several PLA soldiers promising to sacrifice themselves for the mission. That's funny, because the CCP also has no problem with the cannon fodder sacrificing themselves. China hasn't been shy about using its guns recently, and by guns, I mean water cannons. China faced international backlash after one of its Coast Guard ships fired a water cannon at a Philippine boat on Saturday. The Philippines said it was on a resupply mission in the South China Sea when the Chinese Coast Guard ship sprayed it with water and then tried to block it. The boat was able to get past the Chinese Coast Guard, however, and complete its mission. The boat was headed to the Second Thomas Shoal, where the Philippines grounded an old Navy ship back in 1999 as part of its territorial claim. Several Marines live in the boat to help the Philippines reinforce its claim there. China also claims the Second Thomas Shoal, which is why conflicts like these keep happening. In 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague sided with the Philippines in the dispute, but China basically ignored the ruling and kept doing what it was doing. China is now telling the Philippines to remove the ship and claims it was acting in a restrained and professional manner when it used its water cannons. So if you're beginning to wonder, is China really pushing for World War III? Then you might want to stay tuned after the break, because China has a real problem with angry young men. Welcome back. Investment firm BlackRock was still backing Chinese stocks as recently as this summer. That was even as Citigroup, UBS, and others were turning bearish on them. But in July, it warned investors that the geopolitical risk of a US-China military conflict was high, even higher than a conflict between the US and North Korea or NATO and Russia. It says China has demonstrated a willingness to pressure Taiwan, presenting risks for investors, and that the risk of accidental or intentional escalation is high. Despite that assessment, though, BlackRock continues to pour U.S. and other investors' money into China. This has made it a target of the U.S. House Select Committee on China. According to a letter seen by the Wall Street Journal, the committee said BlackRock has invested more than $429 million in more than 60 Chinese companies that U.S. agencies have flagged on security or human rights grounds. The letter accused BlackRock of feeding a national security threat and undermining American values, to which I say values. Since when has Wall Street had any values? Now the Biden administration is stopping some investments in certain companies in China. But this week it expanded those to include U.S. investment in sensitive tech like microelectronics, AI, and quantum information technologies. It said China's capabilities in such domains constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. While Biden signed the executive order this week, the rule isn't likely going to go into effect for several months because it first has to go to public comment. But Biden is also testing Xi Jinping by barring Hong Kong's leader from an APEC summit in the U.S. later this year. The U.S. sanctioned Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee after the national security law was imposed by Beijing in 2020. At the time, Lee was Hong Kong's national security chief and was instrumental in quashing the pro-democracy protests. China was demanding the U.S. let John Lee come to the meeting, and the U.S. was dithering about it. It's nice to see that after all the kowtowing to China the Biden administration has been doing, that somewhere deep down inside, it still has a spine. And after the break, China's got some crazy ideas on how to deal with its youth. Welcome back. We've talked before about how China's facing a massive youth unemployment crisis right now. Well, the government has come up with some, shall we say, rather creative solutions, such as going to work in the countryside, doing manual labor, join the military, and just eat bitterness. Yeah, who needs a job when you can eat your bitterness all day? I'm sure it's just as good as eating real food. Well, one government program is tapping into the unemployment crisis by getting young people to hang out with senior citizens. Civil Affairs Bureau in the district of Hangzhou offers college graduates free accommodation for spending time with elderly residents, which is a model that's been adopted in places like the Netherlands and the US. If this works, it could somewhat kill two birds with one stone: China's youth unemployment crisis and its rapidly aging population. But really, the youth unemployment is their own damn fault. Kids these days spend too much time on their smartphones, you see. That's why China is planning to limit how long kids can spend on their smartphones. The proposal requires device makers to introduce time limits on internet use for children and app operators to roll out different pools of content for youths of different ages. This is absolutely for their own good and is definitely not a ploy to keep kids from seeing any crazy stories about youth unemployment on their phones. China's bracing for another storm this week. After Typhoon Doksuri hit the east coast last week, it's bracing for another typhoon to hit the northern province of Heilongjiang as of this recording. On Monday, we've got a video coming out about the scandals surrounding the flooding, so stay tuned for that. And this episode was sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there's a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. When I signed up for Incogni, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information without my permission. And these companies can get hacked, spreading my private information even more widely. For example, a couple months ago, thousands of Norton LifeLock customers got hacked, which is ironic since the whole point of LifeLock is identity theft protection. This just goes to show even the biggest companies can get hacked. So what can you do? Get as many companies as possible to delete your data off the internet. And that's what Incogni does for you. Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 99 of these data brokers, with a lot more in progress. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So I recommend you get Incogni for yourself. Click the link below or go to incogni.com/uncensored. The first 100 people to use the code Uncensored will get 60% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.